As the crisis escalates, the Spanish Senate has triggered Article 155. For the first time in the history of this country, this article has been invoked to curtail Catalonia's autonomy. This is after the Catalan parliament, just a few minutes back, voted to declare independence from Spain. So the crisis clearly escalating. The Catalan parliament, just a few minutes back, voted to establish an independent republic in defiance of the Spanish government, which is expected to sack the region's president and impose direct rule within the next few hours, and that's happening. So what the Spanish government essentially is doing, what the picture on your screen describes, is the senators from Spain voting to curtail Catalonia's autonomy. Will this lead to more violence is the big question. European neighbors have supported Spain, and Catalonia in that sense stands isolated at this point. The Catalan parliament has dug its heels in and decided that they want to break away from Spain. So this is essentially an impasse. And we've seen violence in the past. The day of the referendum, the independence referendum, we saw a lot of violence, a lot of police presence across Barcelona. We can tell you that within minutes of the Catalonian parliament voting for independence, celebrations broke out in Spain. 43% in Barcelona, in fact, 43% of the Catalan population had voted on the day of the referendum. Those supporting the referendum and independence say that the number could have been much higher had the situation been more conducive for people to come out and vote. What was happening on the streets, in fact, was violence. Protesters were being rounded up, and the Spanish police was criticized for the way the situation was handled. Will we see those scenes being repeated again? We do not know. Padma Rao, my colleague, joining us. Padma, we are looking at Carles Puigdemont, and we've seen two parliaments convening, one in Catalonia, one in Barcelona, one in Madrid. And the Spanish Senate has now decided that it is going to curtail the autonomy of Catalonia. So it's again a deadlock. Where do we go from here?
Well, they've been, this cat and mouse game has been going on for a while, in fact, for several weeks, ever since the referendum. Initially, after the referendum, Mr. Carles Puigdemont was given a deadline by Madrid to declare or to make it clear whether he had indeed declared independence or not. And he, in turn, said, yes, he had, on a piece of paper, so to speak, which he'd put on the back burner, and he was first opening up for talks with Madrid. This went on. The ball kept, sort of being played back and forth between both the courts. And finally, it was time for the deadline, the latest deadline to expire, and Madrid decided it would go in for the Senate meet, that is the upper house of the parliament in Madrid. And it did invite, this is important to know, Mr. Carles Puigdemont was invited to Madrid to participate in the Senate meeting and to present his point of view and argue why Article 155 should not be imposed. But he refused to attend because he was under the impression that they would have imposed it anyway. At least that's what he said. And then there has been a bit of backtracking, as you know, Palki. So, I'm afraid that we may not, hopefully we will not see the kind of violence that we saw the first time Madrid sent in the Central Police Forces. But that it may have to do that again is obvious, because there are people on the streets and, that there will have to be some sort of show of Madrid keeping law and order there.
Right. Let's, for the benefit of our viewers, explain what is Article 155 that the Spanish Senate has just invoked, and what are the consequences. What's interesting to note is that political experts in Spain on either side of the divide have not been able to arrive at a consensus on what the possible consequences for the enactment of Article 155 will be. According to Madrid, this clause is in no way an attack on Catalonia's autonomy. Article 155, according to them, will simply, quote-unquote, fix the problems caused by an unlawful referendum and restore the constitutional order in Catalonia. And they say that the people of Catalonia are not oppressed, and the people of Catalonia will not be oppressed even after the enactment of Article 155. In fact, Mariano Rajoy has listed 4 goals for enacting this article: to return to legality, to recover normality and coexistence, to continue with economic recovery, and to have an election in Catalonia in normal political circumstances. That is how he phrased it. It's very, very interesting. after the enactment of Article 155, what happens is that the Catalan regional government will be dissolved. The central government in Madrid will start governing Catalonia single-handedly, and in 6 months, early regional elections will be held. So this is what Madrid is planning. Will Barcelona comply? Remains to be seen. So Padma, this is also a situation where we'll have to see whose interpretation of this article we go by.
Well, I think the ultimate interpretation of any article will remain with the Constitutional Court of Spain, which has already declared the referendum illegal, which has declared any subsequent declaration of independence illegal. So I think this falls pretty much within the same category. And having said that, Palki, you must remember that Mr. Carles Puigdemont and his associates have also had plenty of time to consider the consequences of, of Article 155 being imposed. Now, as you pointed out, this will mean fresh regional elections within the next six months and a temporary suspension of the autonomy. It will certainly be ruled directly by Madrid. This does not, of course, rule out, the possibility that Mr. Puigdemont himself will return should there be fresh elections held under the umbrella of Spain. But, of course, it will be a new Mr. Puigdemont who returns, because I am absolutely certain that there are going to be talks now. And as I said, Mr. Puigdemont's popularity, we haven't yet had a thermometer or an indicator to gauge just how much that popularity has been affected over the past few weeks when he has dithered over certain issues. And also, as you know, one of his ministers left his cabinet just a day ago, and he has stepped back from several things that he had announced. So there is going to be, for instance, he himself said that he's going to call a snap election, but then he backed away from that. So I think you will see he is very much on the back foot. There is no doubt about that. But it remains to be seen whether, to what extent these talks will be held in full public glare. And a very last point, Palki, right from the beginning, there has been, there have been many, many reports that it is not just all of Catalonia, or rather 42% of Catalonia standing out on the streets asking for independence, that there has been external support. Now, I know this sounds very, sort of dark and dire, but there are countries, we shouldn't forget, that, have an axe to grind with both the European Union as well as Spain. And some of the leaders, international leaders, have expressed their support for Catalonia. But all that won't matter, because ultimately it is the government of Spain, the European Union, and its two largest economies, France and Germany, that decide. And they have made it very, very clear that there is going to be no separate state in Catalonia.
So the Catalan parliament voting to declare independence. The move was backed 70-10 in a ballot boycotted by opposition MPs. That's what we can tell. And coming back to the leader, the democratically elected president of the region, Carles Puigdemont, there are fears that he may have to face charges and may end up like his predecessor, removed from political life and may be forced to pay thousands of euros in fines. So we do not know if he'll be around to contest the next election whenever it is held. On the question of Catalonia's autonomy, if Article 155 is imposed in letter and spirit, it allows the government of Spain to review all future parliamentary activity in Catalonia, which means that autonomy is essentially going to be reduced to something symbolic. And the regional parliament will lose the authority to pass any legislation without the central government's strict approval. Padma, in a context, in a European context, what does autonomy really mean for Catalonia, given the fact that a lot of things are decided for them as a bloc, as a continent? How much did Catalonia have, and why was it so important for these people to fight for autonomy?
Well, I think, as we've pointed out, WION has been pointing this out from day one of our coverage, remember that, it was only in 1975 or 76 that Spain became a democracy after the dictatorship of General Franco. Now, please remember, Palki, that this region of Catalonia has been autonomous for almost 1,000 years. And certainly, since 1975, since the birth of the new democracy, it has kept that status. And now just let's ask ourselves, ourselves, why is it that we did not see such scenes, similar scenes of, or such a large movement pouring out onto the streets asking for separation from Spain between 1975, 76 and 2006, 2007. Now that is 30 years. Where were these voices? Where was this cry for separatism at that time? The thing is that the European Union was doing very well, and so was Spain. So there was no call for separation. There were certainly discussions every now and then for a bit of, greater autonomy here, a few more powers there, and that went on during these 30 years. Now it's only when Spain suffered, took a big blow during the EU recession, that is when, Germany and the European Union had to bail Spain out. That is when calls for separatism began to grow louder. And in that sense, there are people in Spain who feel that this is Catalonia kicking Spain, or kicking the country that they prospered off when it was down and out. So this is the feeling represented by many other people in Spain who oppose this referendum. They're not against separatism per se. They're not against granting a special status to Catalonia per se, because everybody knows this is a region with a separate language, a separate culture, and it's much more closely linked to the cultures of southern France, L'Occitan, and also the Balearic Islands. So this is, there are many such pockets in Europe. This is not the only one. And again, a very last point, Palki, there are people who fear, there have been sort of doomsday scenarios being painted in the media that all of a sudden the many different ethnic groups in Europe are going to start protesting and ask for separatism again. I don't think when you have a resurgent European Union, a resurgent Germany, a resurgent export market for Germany, and with the euro on the upswing again, I think it would be extremely foolish, and I don't think anybody would think of separatism and separating from the European Union altogether.
Right. In fact, in order to invoke Article 155 completely, we understand that the central government in Madrid has also decided to take control of the Catalan public media, TV3 and Catalonia Radio, and that is coming in for some criticism. Padma, a massive task awaits Madrid in terms of proving to the world and to the people of Catalonia, more importantly, that it's not attacking their autonomy and dignity. It's just preserving the rule of the law, as Mr. Rajoy likes to put it.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a balancing act between a show of force or a show of determination to keep people off the streets and to enforce law and order. But on the other hand, I think Mr. Puigdemont has used the full glare of the media, and the question remains as to what extent the media is going to keep him in that glare now that it's all, so to speak, over, and the one it's perhaps this is the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning, but in one sense, one chapter, the chapter of uncertainty, has been closed. And I think responsible media concerns would do well to realize that the more they focus on what is essentially a non-constitutional issue or something that has been declared non-constitutional, the likelier the situation on the ground is to worsen, because it's the media glare and the media attention that the separatism movement in Catalonia has really utilized to its benefit over the past few months.
The million-dollar question, Padma, is what happens now? One side has declared independence, the other side has revoked their autonomy. Where do things stand?
Yeah, it's a kind of a tug of war. It's a kind of pull me, push you situation. What is going to happen is that that Madrid, there are going to be some accusations flung towards each other. Madrid is of course going to declare what happened in the Catalan Parliament as unconstitutional and illegal, because it comes under the same constitutional court order that banned the referendum in the first place. So since the referendum was linked to the call for separatism, and since the call for separatism is linked to what happened in the Catalan Parliament today, all those developments will be seen as illegal, and they will fall under pretty much the same law. So I think what we're going to see is a Madrid coming out very strongly and making that point clear. The fact that the Catalan crisis, the Catalan movement has no legal basis within Spain, and the only legal basis and the only way out there will be is talks. To come back to what you said earlier, Mr. Puigdemont may have lost on popularity, but I don't think anyone in Madrid is going to be unwise by sort of trying to remove him from the scene altogether, or try and replace him with someone who's friendlier to Madrid. I think they would be making a bad mistake were they to do that, because whatever said and done, he is being seen as the face of the movement and the face of the separatism movement. So I think what we will see, or what we may see, is a little more flexibility on part of Madrid and a little more indulgence on part of Madrid to allow Mr. Puigdemont to come to the table and negotiate, and not punish him straight away or outrightly for all the indeed constitutionally unkosher aspects of the past few weeks that he has headed.
A word on the pictures on our screens. This is historic, if anything is, and a somber sight in a way as these leaders take a pledge. I understand these are pictures from Barcelona, where the leaders have once again decided that they are going to fight for their independence